Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity for me also to ventilate on this particular motion. And I want to say right from the onset that I do support this particular motion, Madam Speaker, because this is our country. If it sinks with all of us. Madam Speaker, allow me to first give pass my condolences to the families of those that lost their loved ones during the skirmishes that were there last week and this week, Madam Speaker. We know how it feels to lose a loved one, Madam Speaker, especially where such a death was abrupt and sudden, Madam Speaker. And I maintain that our police officers should only use live bullets or open fire, Madam Speaker, where they are facing an enemy mostly that is armed. And Madam Speaker, not just somebody that is just demonstrating, Madam Speaker. And I think the police are well trained to deal, to immobilize and arrest wrongdoers, Madam Speaker. So I want to say that opening fire should be the last resort because everybody that has been given power, they should be able to exercise it with restraint, Madam Speaker, and with the responsibility. Madam Speaker, the Gen Zs have spoken, and they had a right under Section 37 of our Constitution that guarantees any citizen the right to demonstrate and express themselves through demos, Madam Speaker, as long as they are unarmed. And so we want to say the Generation Z were perfectly within their right under the Constitution, and we know they were not armed. Madam Speaker, we must also take this opportunity to separate chaff from wheat, Madam Speaker, because, of course, we know that these demos have been infiltrated by criminals, Madam Speaker, whom we must see to it, especially as police officers. The police officers should see to it that action is taken against criminals that infiltrate genuine demonstrations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a time to reflect. This is a time to ask ourselves, exactly how did we find ourselves here? And Madam Speaker, I may say things that maybe have been said here, Madam Speaker, but we need to repeat where necessary of the things that have not been done in the right way and that have cost us the problem that we find ourselves in. People have talked about opulence, display of money, living, largesse in the lives of politicians, Madam Speaker. People carrying bundles of notes, Madam Speaker, this is something that must be condemned by all and sundry. Some of us have been ridiculed for not having, those loads and loads of cash, Madam Speaker. That when maybe you are attending a harambe somewhere and you give something or you contribute something from your salary that may not be as big as maybe some colleagues that you may be with, Madam Speaker, carrying hundreds of thousands or even millions, Madam Speaker, it's sad that even some church leaders have ridiculed some of us, saying that we contribute, amounts that cannot even buy some tobacco, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, I think this is something that Kenyans have been watching slowly but surely and have not been very happy about, Madam Speaker. And this is something that we should all condemn. Let people, if they have to contribute their hard-earned cash, Madam Speaker, because this points to corruption. Otherwise, we know how much people are paid and how much they contribute in these RBAs, Madam Speaker. And this is something that we need to talk about. Madam Speaker, there have been very many things that have been happening in our society. I have a background of education, Madam Speaker, and I can tell you there are things that we have done in this country that should not be done, including taking some public institutions of learning and kind of privatizing them, Madam Speaker. And allow me to mention one or two. Madam Speaker, we have a school called Hospital Hill Primary School. This is a public school, but that has been privatized. Nairobi Primary School, Madam Speaker. There is a school called Tigoni Primary School in Kiambu. These are public schools, but which people, the middle class and people who are well-to-do, have taken and, introduced some rules, some, arrangements through the PTA, Madam Speaker, and kind of privatize these schools, where it is very hard for ordinary motors, Madam Speaker, to gain admittance to that school, to those schools for their children. And all this time, our people have been watching that I cannot be able to take my child to Nairobi Primary School because there are charges, illegal charges, Madam Speaker. And people have been, this has been building up. Madam Speaker, corruption is also something that has made people to build up some anger and, dissatisfaction against government and leadership, Madam Speaker. And recently, there was a young man, Madam Speaker, I know this is a subject of a court case, but I'm not going to discuss the merits or demerits of the same. But Madam Speaker, a young man, it was unfortunate, but a young man felt that he could not, according to his claim, he could not be able to raise the bribe that a police officer was asking, Madam Speaker. And the young man ended up beating up that police officer, Madam Speaker. I do not want to stand here and say that that was right. But, Madam Speaker, you can imagine that it was out of frustration that a police officer is demanding amounts of money from a young man that cannot afford such amounts of money. And, Madam Speaker, some police stations have even been able to upscale corruption. And I want to cite Kasarani Police Station, Madam Speaker. This is a police station where you will find tens of police officers along the road, Madam Speaker. And what do? They do not want to take the usual 50 or 10 or 100 Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker. So they'll just order you to drive your vehicle into the police station where they will demand for a big amount of money as bribe, Madam Speaker, before you are released. And, Madam Speaker, we must call this out. This is why we are where we are, because those that cannot afford these amounts of money, Madam Speaker, are always at a disadvantage. What does our judiciary do? In aiding, in solving or helping resolve these matters of corruption, Madam Speaker, the processes are lengthy. Somebody that has been accused, Madam Speaker, of corruption will take ages before their cases are heard and determined. And of course, they are going to buy their way. They are going to compromise even investigations, Madam Speaker, because even the kind of bail they get is very friendly. Somebody stealing, say, 100 million, given a bail. Bill terms of about 2 million, Madam Speaker. So people are even more than happy to steal, pay bail, buy whoever that it is that you have to buy. And this is what has caused frustration in our people, Madam Speaker, leading to the events of the last 2 weeks. Madam Speaker, our laws are also weak. The day before yesterday, I think on Tuesday, we hosted the CS Health, Madam Speaker, the Committee of Health, where I'm a member. And, we wanted to know what NHIF is doing to see to it that there are no fraudulent claims, Madam Speaker. And where they are there, what they do in order for them to be able to recover the funds so lost. And Madam Speaker, we were very frustrated that the law does not allow NHIF, for example, even after they have discovered that a claim was fraudulent, to take such a fraudster to court, Madam Speaker. That they leave it to investigative agencies to look at it and take this matter to court. And I mean, that is frustrating. Because if I catch you stealing some bananas from my shamba, Madam Speaker, I should just go take you to the police, report you to the police station. Then you defend your case. The only thing I should be asked to do is the burden of proof that should be laid on me. But look at what NHIF is saying, that they cannot be able to take a fraudulent medical facility, a medical facility that is placing a fraudulent claim to court, Madam Speaker. That they have to rely on another institution, an investigative one. These are the things that have made Kenyans, that have frustrated Kenyans, and that is why, Madam Speaker, we find ourselves where we were. The other thing is waste of public funds. I've been asking myself, what happened to the Volkswagen Passat that former President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was finance minister, introduced and decided that those was going to be the vehicles that were going to be used by public officers, Madam Speaker? How did we get back to V8, to Prados for public officers, Madam Speaker? We must go back to living by what we tell Kenyans. Let us see CSS in Volkswagen Passats, Madam Speaker, as was done that time, in order for us to save on public funds, Madam Speaker. The other day I was listening to CS Kuria, and he was saying that he was very, very, very frustrated and very concerned going to Mombasa, finding some stuff, having traveled all the way from Nairobi to Mombasa to receive him, some stuff he did not need. Then when he asked why, he was told that somebody had not had an opportunity to get per diem for quite some time, and that is why they had been sent there. Madam Speaker, really? That all we care is that we see to it that some staffers get per diem, even when we do not need their services? These are things that we need to look into and, of course, make corrections where we need to make corrections, Madam Speaker. Now, many colleagues here have talked about chief administrative secretaries, Madam Speaker. Of course, I know that we don't have any one of them serving. But, Madam Speaker, there are rumors that there are plans to reinstate them. Madam Speaker, do we need CASs? What is it that they can do? What is it that we need them for? What can they do? What are they supposed to do that PSs cannot do, Madam Speaker? These are some of the things that we need to forget and forget completely. There should not even be anything like that, because it has been determined as an illegal position, Madam Speaker, so that we save on public funds, Madam Speaker. Many people have mentioned the office of the First Lady, the office of the Second Lady, the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and his spouse also, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy that His Excellency the President has pronounced himself on the closure of these offices, Madam Speaker. And I say this knowing very well, because in Kiswahili they say ya Mungu ni mengi, hayajulikani, knowing very well that I can also be president tomorrow, and my wife will be a first lady. But I do not want my wife, even if I become president, to have an office funded by the exchequer, Madam Speaker, because we need to save on expenditure, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy that the President has since dealt with that matter and pronounced himself, Madam Speaker. We may need to discuss on whether we need a Prime Cabinet Secretary and an office for that matter, Madam Speaker, for this particular position. Recently, after the floods, Madam Speaker, there were demolitions. But these demolitions were profiled. They only happened in low-income, in those areas where the low-income earners live, Madam Speaker. And this was under the guise of clearing riparian land, Madam Speaker. But go to places like Lavington. You will even see some river courses, Madam Speaker, interfered with in order for somebody to create room to erect buildings along, in fact, next to the river, not just on riparian land, but next to the river. There was no demolition happening there, while we were demolishing settlements of those of the poor, the poorest of the poor, Madam Speaker. And this is what has caused dissatisfaction, Madam Speaker. The law must be seen to be applied equally, Madam Speaker, to those that have and those that do not have, Madam Speaker. I'm surprised how time moves, how fast time moves. So, Madam Speaker, this is something that has caused a lot of problems with our people. Madam Speaker, the CSs have abandoned the president. None of them, very few of them, are helping the president in this crisis, Madam Speaker. We do not know what is happening. I've been wondering as a person, is it because maybe they did not appreciate that time when they went for the cabinet meeting late and they were locked outside the gate? Madam Speaker, maybe that cost them some demotivation, that maybe demoralized them, and I would want to ask the president, because he must rein in these CSs, but maybe to do it in a way in future that does not see them being ridiculed or see them looking like school children who came late to school, Madam Speaker. So we do not know whether they have the right morale, but this should be looked into. Needless to say of how they pretend, you know, big people cannot answer calls from us. Some of them do not even honor our committee meetings. Madam Speaker, these are things that we need to think about. Madam Speaker, PSs. Do we need all these PSs? Those are questions that we need to ask ourselves, Madam Speaker. Do we need all of them? What is it that they do that cannot be done without them? Madam Speaker, because my time is running out, we need to rethink about CDF, especially the bursaries given by members of the National Assembly. Somebody raised a very pertinent question. Why do we need to give members of the National Assembly money to give to parents to pay to public schools? Why don't we channel those funds directly to these public schools, Madam Speaker? Maybe we can talk about CDF as far as development is concerned. That is something we can discuss. But really, we give members of parliament money to go, you know, give back to government? I mean, what logic is there, Madam Speaker? I mean, we can use what we are calling means testing. Let us use means testing in order for us to assess the needs of every other student, so that we send these funds directly to their institutions of learning. We do not have, and we have done very well with the new funding model at the university level. We can cascade these downwards to secondary schools, Madam Speaker. We should not just do the things the way they have been done all this time. And finally, I dare to say, this nation could be under a curse. Madam Speaker, I say that, and this is somehow spiritual. Because, Madam Speaker, a father can curse a child. In the same breath, Madam Speaker, a president can curse a country. A mother can curse a child. What am I trying to say, Madam Speaker? Last year, Northlands, owned by the Kenyattas, was attacked. Sheep stolen. Bad things happened. The police never did anything. And that was associated with some leaders, Madam Speaker. Kenyatta may not have been a saint. President Kenyatta Jomo may not have been a saint. But, Madam Speaker, he was the first president of this country. Madam Speaker, he can cast this country from his grave. And this is something that we should take very seriously, Madam Speaker. There have been claims, Madam Speaker. We do not know how true they are.
Senator Newton, there were some ground rules laid before, and I think you wish to abide by them if you were well advised by the majority leader.
Madam Speaker, we said we are just reflecting, and if we want to know how we can heal this nation. So, Madam Speaker, I think these are things that we need to look into. When the former President Uhuru Kenyatta claims, rightly or wrongly, that he's not getting his benefits, Madam Speaker, that's another curse that can befall us. When we are told that security has been withdrawn from the First Lady, Madam Speaker, this can also cause a curse. So what do I suggest that we do, Madam Speaker? Let us...
Senator Nyoto, the guidance I have given you is we were to avoid names in the debates so that you do not personalize.
Okay.
That was the ground rule that was given.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Then I'm well guided.
1 minute for you to finish.
Already pressed. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm suggesting, Madam Speaker, because I love this country, and I cry for this country, Madam Speaker. Can we approach the people that I have mentioned? Can we apologize to them? Can we seek that they lift any curse that they may be having against this nation, Madam Speaker? Because we must speak, Madam Speaker. Let us approach these people. Tell them if we wronged you, we are sorry. If you have spelled any curse on this nation, we persuade you. We beseech you, please lift any such curse that may have been here, because we want our nation to heal, Madam Speaker, and we must do everything, whatever we do, whoever we talk to, but our nation must heal. Madam Speaker, I support and thank you for even the extension of time. Thank you very much.
Senator Catherine Muma, she's not here. Senator Asige.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. As I rise to support this motion, I also want to stand on the submission that I made last week, because everything that I said, I meant. And I also wish to appreciate our substantive
Senators,
speaker.
can you just consult in low tones? Majority